The image guru part I confess to. The opening doors part is not something that is part of my remit. I don't do that. What I do, however, is as an image guru, what I try and help my clients to focus on is what are the issues that they should be communicating about, and I also help them understand that what are the implications of what they're doing and who they're communicating to. So what I am good at is pointing in a direction and also very often enhancing their skills in being able to project themselves correctly. So in this kind of situation, what happens is that it requires knowledge of who they're communicating to. So it's not that I open a door, it's that I tell them that when they walk through the door, what should they say and how would that impact their image. Public affairs management is a relatively new science as far as India is concerned. And that's because of the fact that public affairs used to be, the way it was practiced, used to be a largely a dirty word, because it had nuances of what I call off the balance sheet activity. Where we have come in, and over the last 10 years, what Perfect Relations has done is that in the public affairs space, we have created space for a new kind of activity, and that is helping to communicate with policymakers to influence the direction of policy. Policy where it's wrong, or policy where it is being created, or policy as it's being implemented. So all three things. So that's what we work in. In the public affairs area, the relationship with the client is that of the guru kind, but also as a confidential advisor, telling them what are the aspects of decision making that they need to focus on. That's one, rather than the people. Because what's happened over the past is that too much enthusiasm has been expended on people. It's not about people. Policy making is about a process, and that's the first skill set we've managed to bring into this area of public affairs. If there were one function which over the last 25 years of our existence we've been called in for at the highest level, whether it's in the public sector, when for example there was a fire on an oil rig, or whether it's in the case of a global company when there was a firing in faraway Goa, or whether it's in the case of an Indian company whose license got cancelled, Perfect Relations has always been the first port of call for somebody who's in really deep trouble. So crisis management is something that happens as a plug on rather than as part of a process. Largely we've come in where the agency that was currently handling a client was seen as not geared to have the bandwidth, the experience, the specialized people, and the local teams available on the ground, and that's the reason why we get called in. So whichever company or whichever government agency or whichever organization has called us in, whether sometimes it's even been an NGO, they call us in because they know that we have the ability to put people on the ground with the skills they need. That's the first part. The second part is that over the last 25 years of doing this in India, we also realized some years ago that crisis preparedness as a module needs to be put into companies. So for some of the clients, and this is expensive, for some of the clients who have the budgets to be able to do this, today we have teams that go in and train top management in the 5 life-saving skills, life-saving in terms of the corporate life of a company, that are needed to ensure that crisis preparedness is at a higher level than it ever was before. Lobbying is a dirty word in terms of the kind of nuances and practices that a large number of players have indulged in. Is this a result of the way our democracy functions? I don't quite know. But is it possible to function differently? The answer is absolutely yes. It takes more patience, it takes much deeper skills, and it takes a lot more of focused attention of top management. The problem with bad lobbying, as I call it, and that is why bad lobbying has got a bad press, is because sometimes CEOs or owners want to outsource it and say, we're not doing this, let somebody take care of the dirty work. And then it becomes a dirty job. So where we are concerned, what we advise our clients and our CEOs and the owners of companies who work with us is that this is something that you need to integrate yourself into. Because when the mud starts getting splattered, it's bound to hit you. So rather than outsource it, be part of the process and ensure that you take liability and responsibility for what goes into it. We find that this kind of lobbying does not have a bad name. Whether it's a government department, whether it's a minister, whether it's a panchayat, everybody is willing to talk to the person who is actually the ownership person in terms of what she or he is trying to do on the ground. Very often they get heard, and very often the problems get sorted out. So lobbying of the kind what we call ethical lobbying of the kosher variety is something that we are quite happy to say that we do, and we've had no problem dealing with multiple organizations using these techniques. I think PR is already more than press relations. What is happening is that, like any industry, you follow the 80-20 rule. 80% of agencies in the business do what is easiest to do, which is merely handling some pretty pathetic material to journalists who are absolutely uninformed. So that there's a market there, and so 80% of the companies like to do it, and that's all they're geared to doing. The 80-20 rule, when flipped on its head, today we get 80% of our revenue not from press relations work, but from the advisory work, where we talk to brand managers, and we talk to marketing directors, we talk to people looking after the digital space. For example, digital. It's a huge new way of corporations, companies to reach out to customers. So it's a one-to-one kind of design communications. It's difficult. It requires skills. It requires the same skills that PR people thought they used to have, which is communications. But it's a whole new technology landscape, and it's a whole new patois, a whole new idiom, as it were. So what we do now today is try and ensure that our 80% of our revenue comes from the activities which are no longer those that 80% of the players in the industry try and do. I think it's important to distinguish two things. Social media is changing the way humans communicate with each other. That's one. But digital media goes far beyond that. It's also about ensuring that your reputation is intact in the vast new Ethernet space. So the way we look at digital PR is probably along the same lines that we look at press relations. It's not about putting out one-to-one communications in a mass market. It's about actually changing the platform from which you communicate so that you don't need to say too much, and you already are, in a sense, transmitting those values to everybody who reaches out to you. So you need to communicate less, but you need to have much higher quality. So it's strategic. It requires a vast volume of monitoring, which our teams now have tech tools to help them do that. And three, it's about training. Because once again, like in the case of lobbying, in the digital PR space, we recognize it is the voice of the CEO, it is the voice of the brand, it is the voice of the marketing specialist that needs to be communicating directly with the customers who reach out to them.